Welcome back to Rock'em Sock'em Radio. I'm your host, the People's Interim Champ, and today we're talking about UFC 300 and what the card should be. So here's my UFC 300 fantasy card. Now, today, before I get into it, I'm talking about the UFC shelling out the world domination money that the UFC were talking about before their whole monopoly lawsuit came into play, and get some real matchmaking done. I'm talking about using the funds saved from Francis Ngannou's pay rise out of spite. So here are the ground rules. UFC 300 is about selling 1 million pay-per-views minimum and kind of pleasing genuine fans, and not the other way around. And that's so that the PFL knows who's staying the big dog in 2024 and beyond, and not letting Francis Ngannou single-handedly tear down the system. So let's get into the main event for UFC 300. Now, the main event for the big card UFC 300, in my opinion, should be Tom Aspinall defending the interim heavyweight title against the one and only Brock Lesnar. Now, let's be honest, the interim belt is practically the real belt at this stage. I'm not going to go into the politics as to why. I think many would agree, but this way it makes the make-believe wrestling fans boost the pay-per-view numbers for that precious 1 million pay-per-view sell. I don't think this fight alone would be enough. You'll see from the rest that it needs more. But this way we get to enjoy the nostalgia, watching Brock get beaten up by the future of the heavyweight division. Again, much like with Cain Velasquez in one of the best one-sided beatdowns the heavyweight division has ever seen, Brock needs to be a size bully to get the finish, or if he can't get the takedown, then he just gets outclassed on the feet, and that's exactly what I expect to happen. Now, the co-main event, in my opinion, should be Ronda Rousey versus Juliana Pena. I'm not a huge Ronda Rousey fan, so don't get on me for that, but let's be honest, her on a card would still sell. Now, the rumour is Ronda is trying for another kid. Well, money talks, and we all have a price. Look at Ronda's YouTube channel. She looks like she's wrestling for hillbillies and shopping malls recently, so she needs a payday maybe. Now, there's not many left in the bantamweight division who can KO Ronda. I don't think Juliana Pena is one of them, so Ronda doesn't have that to worry about. And I still don't think anyone in the bantamweight division can submit Ronda. That just shows that the grappling game hasn't improved that much in recent years. Now, Bellator knows how to sell a women's fight. That's match up the lookers. Now, here's another case of that. It's shameless, but hey, the Ronda Rousey fan base equals pay-per-view buys. Now, the next fight down from the co-main event, in my opinion, should be Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3, and make it a 5-round fight. This is mainly to screw over Michael Chandler for some lols. This trilogy, in my opinion, needs to happen before one or both retires. Plus, this is probably a genuine pick and fight between two washed up fighters where anything can happen. Every single round in this fight could be full of surprises, so I think this could be potentially the sleeper fight of the night, but I do still think Conor McGregor would come out on top. Now, the next fight for the main card is Jorge Masvidal versus Covington, the rematch, a 3-round fight. Now, Masvidal's retired, but he's recently said on Twitter that he's unretired. Can you imagine the trash talk in this one to sell the pay-per-views? You just know that Ian Gary's wife would somehow get thrown into the mix. Both of them need a W, both of them need a payday, since their window of earning is basically starting to disappear. They're both now washed up, not just Jorge. The winner gets to fight the 40-year-old Wonder Boy, and, box Jake Paul in about 3 years' time as well. Who knows who wins this one? I'm leaning towards Kobe, but he looked terrible in his last one. But I'm still leaning towards Kobe. Now, the last fight on the main card will be between Dustin Poirier versus Armin Tsarukyan. This is the first and probably the only real genuine fight for fight fans on the main card. This one basically lets determine if Dustin Poirier still has it at the elite level of the best division in the UFC, and it also determines if Armin Tsarukyan really is future champ. This fight answers both questions. Now, the main fight for the prelim card, the headline of the prelim card, will be between Max Holloway moving up to lightweight to expose Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. You can tell where my fan views skew on this one. I say let Paddy think he can beat the smaller man and show him what he can actually do against a world-class fighter. This should be good fun and has got a big name. And the next fight down from the prelim card is Dominic Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt. 2 basically sacrificing Cody here. He's coming off a highlight reel knockout against Brian Kelleher, but this is a revenge match, which Cody has essentially been ducking for the sake of his legacy, and it lets Cody see if he can relive the biggest fluke of his career, or if it was indeed a fluke like we all think it was. Now the next fight has to include Jim Miller. He's fought at UFC 100, 200. How could he not fight at UFC 300? I say pit him against Tony Ferguson. If Tony Ferguson insists on not retiring and the UFC wanted to milk Tony's brains and knees of his soul, then at least have him move to welterweight. I don't want to see him cutting weight anymore. And I don't think Tony's got any wins left in him in the UFC or even out the UFC at this stage. I think Jim Miller gets the win and probably the finish as well, sadly. Now the last prelim fight to ensure this gets eyeballs, this gets a million pay-per-view buys, is the return of Paige VanZant against Tracy Cortez. This one gets the incel market watching early. Don't underestimate the perv market. There's some serious money there. Paige VanZant alone pulls in crazy numbers from just her OnlyFans audience, and this guarantees ESPN will be happy with the viewership. Tracy Cortez doing her bit as well. Now here's some analysis of my card. Now my version of UFC 300 acknowledges the real goal of a UFC 300 card, which is to get at least 1 million pay-per-views, show everyone who's boss. I'm thinking of PFL, I'm thinking of Francis Ngannou here. Now UFC 100 got 1.6 million pay-per-view buys, UFC 200 got 1 million pay-per-view buys. If UFC 300 gets less than 1 million pay-per-view buys, people will be talking about that trend going downwards. I think this version gets 1 million pay-per-view buys, with Conor, Masvidal, Ronda and Brock alone. Those names can't get 1 million pay-per-view buys anymore. The world doesn't work like that. I think you have to get the Avengers together. That's Conor, Masvidal, Ronda and Brock, and then still you have to put eye candy on there like Paige VanZant and Tracy Cortez, and the fun fights, the not gimmick fights, but the ones that pleases the casual audience and gets them in. Now you'll note that I left out Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad on purpose. That's just not UFC 300 material in my opinion, even with an extra title on the card. I don't think it does that much for pay-per-view buys. Now one thing you'll also notice is that I put lots of fighters past their primes or stars from yesteryear on here. Now that's because UFC as a promotion has failed to produce a new crop of stars anywhere near as big as they had, say, around 10 years ago. I think that's a solid main card, an okay prelim. I think prelims could be better, but I think with that main card, I think it does get 1 million pay-per-view buys. Maybe in any fantasy UFC 300 card, maybe there's no just banger card top to bottom for UFC 300. Let me know what I missed out, what fight you would want to see. Don't forget to like, that helps out, and I'm out.